it was not love. No, no, when lying is allowed, grow like a vine around the soul. Not when respect is replaced by diplomacy and tenderness out of indifference. For years, I believed that our bond was strong because we resisted the storms together. But the truth is that I could resist alone. I was clinging to an image, to a carefully constructed illusion. He was the emperor, I was his consort. Together, we represented perfection, but perfection was a mask that hid the distance I never knew how to read. I will resist the silences, to justify every absence, every lost look, every half-word, because it was easier to pretend that all was well to face the obvious. It wasn't love, it was duty, it was routine, was what was expected of us. And the day that structure collapsed, it was not because of a sudden betrayal, it was because finally stopped pretending. That marriage did not collapse because of a mistress, collapsed due to the accumulation of silent resignations, of unspoken truths, of empty gestures. When he asked me for a divorce, it wasn't just a blow to the heart, it was the recognition that it had all been a negotiation of power. I gave love, he was looking for control. And when I no longer needed what I offered, just left me aside, now I know it. What was broken that day was not love, it was the pact. Balance the lie. And although it hurt, it was also liberating. Because for the first time, I could see things as they were. And I began to see myself not as the wife, but as the woman who survived the fall. He looked me in the mirror and did not recognize to the woman on the other side, not because I was broken, but because I was finally awake. For so long, I had played a role. The ideal wife, the exemplary empress, the figure without flaws, without complaints, without a voice of its own. It was a statue covered with gold, admired by all, heard by no one. But the gold cracks when the pain goes through it. And under the layer, I found that there was meat wounds, fire, had lived for others, for the empire, for approval, to demonstrate that he was worthy, but worthy of being ignored, of being used as currency in power games, to see how another one took my place while I kept the tomb intact. The day I signed that paper was not a defeat, was the end of the greatest lie, that my courage depended on being by his side. I discovered that I don't need an imposed crown. I do not need to be validated for their love, because his love was never mine. It was just an agreement disguised as affection. I began to speak aloud about what I used to whisper. In my mind, I started to breathe without fear, to walk without hunching over to please, and in that paradise, a new woman began to emerge, a woman who did not need a shared throne, but a destiny of its own. I was brought up to be a man's shadow, but now I wanted to learn to be my own light. I no longer cared what his ministers thought. The people's judgment no longer hurt me. I no longer belonged in that palace. I no longer belonged to anyone. It was mine, and that was just the beginning. The world outside the palace was different and cruder, more real, but also freer. There were no attendees whispering behind the curtains. There were no eyes watching every movement, every word, every gesture. Just the sound of the wind and my own breathing. I was afraid, of course I was. Had lived so long under imposed rules. Who did not know how to walk without them? But that fear was not my enemy. Was the sign that she was alive. For the first time, made decisions that did not seek to, making decisions that were not following protocol and an emperor's desires, nor the expectations of a court. Made decisions for me. I discovered that I didn't know many things, how to live without owing everything to a male figure, how to trust my own thoughts, without asking for approval, how to face failure without turning it into shame. But I learned step by step, fall after fall, silence after silence, and the more I advanced, I understood that I was not alone, that there were eyes that looked at me, not with pity but with silent admiration. People who made also worked on structures, broken in invisible cages, and that when I saw myself walking forward, without losing their minds, they were encouraged to move as well. Was not an example? Was a wound walking? But it was a wound that refused to die. And on that floor, something happened that I did not expect. A letter. An offer. A new principle disguised as diplomatic courtesy. A name written in firm ink. A name that would change everything. And so on without looking for it. My story began again. The letter was not extensive, but every word was carefully chosen, as if he knew what he needed to hear without even knowing me. Said not all crowns weigh just as some do not oppress but release. Then a woman who has been betrayed is no less dignified but wiser. I read it 3 times, not because he hesitated, but because I wanted to memorize it. I wanted to keep that unknown voice that spoke to me. No judgment, no demands, no shadow. Offered me a place in a distant land. An opportunity to start over. For not what I was, but what I could still be. I did not respond immediately, not for lack of decision, but because for the first time he had the privilege of choosing, of thinking about breathing. I sat by the window of a room I no longer felt. I looked at the sky and I felt that this sky, the same as in my life, no longer belonged to me, because I no longer wanted to be the woman I expected, nor the one that endured, nor the one that justified. I wanted to be the one to spread my wings, even if it hurt, the one who said no, even if it shook, the one facing forward, even if everyone expected him to lower his head. I took the pen. I wrote only one sentence: I accept your offer. And with that ink, I did not sign an escape. I signed my return to my nap. History is also your profession, leave your like. You are not alone, you are not alone. We continue walking together. The following days were a silent dance of preparations. But it wasn't the servants who were packing this time. I folded each garment with the calm of the one who says goodbye, not of a place but of a broken version of itself. I don't understand much, only what is necessary. I understand my dignity, my silence, my strength. I did not notify anyone. They did not deserve my explanations. Because those who kept quiet while I was falling apart, they had no right to my words. Now that I was rebuilding myself, walking in the corridors was strange and it didn't hurt anymore. It was as if all that world that one day defined me, now it was just the echo of what I was. Portraits, columns, gardens. Everything was the same, but I was no longer the same. I did not cry a single tear, because I understood that not everything that hurts deserves mourning, and that there are losses that deep down are disguised releases. When the front door closed behind me, I did not look back, not out of pride, but because there was something new up ahead, and I had chosen to live. What was coming would not be easy, I knew it. But neither was staying where they didn't love me. And if I was going to suffer, at least now it would be in my own, not for those of others. The woman who came out of that palace was not a victim, was it? And more than that, was an empress without a kingdom, but with a destiny? Received me with respect, not with flowers or with false bubbles, with respect. And that was enough for me. Because he was not looking for compliments, he was looking for dry land. My new home did not have golden walls. There were no rooms that will shine, nor thrones covered with jewels. But it had something much more valuable: silence, open sky, and freedom. They gave me a place to stay, a space to breathe. And for the first time in a long time, I slept without fear. I didn't dream about the past, nor with betrayals. I dreamed with me, with my voice, with my new story. And when I woke up, I knew that chapter was closed. Not forgotten, but closed. Because it is not a matter of erasing what has been experienced, but to write over with firm ink, with hands that tremble but do not give up. My story was no longer that of an abandoned woman, was that of a woman who chose to stand up. And in that distant country, on the other side of pride and heartbreak, the unthinkable would begin. A new bond, a new risk, a a new heart. This time I would not offer my soul to be set on foot, would offer it to anyone who knew how to hold it. And if I loved again, would be with everything, but never from necessity, only from the fullness. Because he who has lost everything knows exactly what he deserves. If this story touched your soul, subscribe. Like us, shares with those in need. Remember that falling is not the end, is the beginning of something stronger.